Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the January meeting, our first meeting of 2022 for the Portsmouth Police Commission. We have some exciting business to take care of this evening. So we're going to get right to that. But before I do, we'll formally call the meeting to order. And let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And can we ask Commissioner Coyle's family to help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. So, can I get a motion to suspend the normal agenda items and move up the swearing in?
Yes. I move to suspend the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Terrific. So we'll turn it to you, Chief, for the swearing in of our newest soon-to-be minted officers. And the commissioners are going to come down to the floor so we can actually be part of the swearing in.
Welcome. Thank you for your attendance. We're going to do a swearing-in ceremony for our two newest officers who happen to be a married couple, Cassidy and Jeff, John Furlane, but he goes by Jeff Rohde. This has kind of come full circle and really showing my age because I've known Cassidy since she was a little baby. Her dad used to work here in the police department. He was a lieutenant. Was one of the main reasons why I came to Portsmouth PD in the beginning of my career. He took me in as a mentorship, and I feel it's come around now. Cassidy's grown up, been a police officer for the last 3 years in Colorado, and decided to come back home, and we're fortunate to have her and Jeff join our department. So Cassidy, since you're now senior to Jeff, you'll be up first. Put your right hand up. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Cassidy Rohde,
I, Cassidy Rohde,
the above name appointee,
the above name appointee,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform all duties incumbent on me
discharge and perform all duties incumbent on me
as a police officer, constable, and night watchman of said city of Portsmouth,
as a police officer, constable, and night watchman of the city of Portsmouth,
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
agreeable to the rules and regulations of the Constitution
agreeable to the rules and regulations of the Constitution
and laws of the state of New Hampshire,
and laws of the state of New Hampshire,
so help me God.
so help me God.
By virtue of the authority vested in me through the Police Commission and RSA 105-C, trusting in your integrity and fidelity, do hereby constitute and appoint you a police officer, constable, and night watchman of said city of Portsmouth, with all the power and authority and subject to all the duties and liabilities provided by law. Thank you.
Don't mind me.
Congratulations.
Yeah, a couple pictures I have. Just a couple more.
Just to give a little bio on Cassidy, Officer Cassidy Rhodey is a lateral transfer from Elizabeth, Colorado, where she's been a police officer at the Lone Tree Police Department for 2 years. She's a graduate of the University of Colorado, Denver, and she's also the daughter of Lieutenant Steve Demo. Jeff, you can come up next. Officer Jeff Rhodey, I'm going to call you Jeff, even though it's John, is a lateral transfer also from Elizabeth, Colorado, where he served as a patrol deputy at the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Department for a little over a year. Prior to this, John served as a detentions deputy at Arapahoe County Jail for 2 years. John serves as an infantry corporal in the U.S. Marine Corps from October 2013 to January 2018. During his military service, he was deployed overseas 3 times. You going to raise your right hand? You're tall. And repeat after me. I, John Rhodey,
I, John Rhodey,
the above name appointee,
the above named appointee,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform all duties incumbent on me
discharge and perform all duties incumbent on me
as a police officer, constable, and night watchman of said city of Portsmouth,
as a police officer, constable, and night watchman of the city of Portsmouth,
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
agreeable to the rules and regulations of the Constitution
agreeable to the rules and regulations of the Constitution
and laws of the state of New Hampshire,
and the laws of the state of New Hampshire,
so help me God.
so help me God.
By virtue of the authority vested in me through the Police Commission and RSA 105-C, trusting in your integrity and fidelity, do hereby constitute and appoint you a police officer, constable, and night watchman of said city of Portsmouth, with all the power and authority and subject to all the duties and liabilities provided by law. Congratulations. You want to put it on him? Can she reach that high? All right. That'll conclude our ceremony. If you'd like to stay for the rest of the commission, you're welcome, but you can leave if you prefer.
Pretty much clears things out.
Yeah. All right, on we go. So we'll get back to this regular agenda, and I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from the meeting held on December 21st.
Second.
No, I need a motion and
Yeah,
a second.
I'd make the motion to accept the
And I'll
minutes.
second it.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. This is the point in the agenda where we invite public comment. Anyone here would like to see Stephanie? You're the lone audience member.
I'm the only one left. Hello, Stephanie Hausman. I
Turn the mic towards you, Stephanie.
Turn the mic
The
towards
tall
me.
one.
the tall one. Thank you, Chief. Hello, Stephanie Hausman. I just wanted to say that I'm looking forward to hearing the Commission's update on our requested reforms. I'm particularly interested, I know the mobile crisis response has been operating in the county for a couple of weeks now, or maybe longer. So I'm anxious to hear how that has been going in terms of a collaboration with the police department. And also interested with the change of semester, whether the grad student that had been working in the PD as an intern collecting data on prosecutions, whether that person has resolved her work, reached any conclusions, or is continuing to gather data and work in the PD. So thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing anyone else here for public comment, we'll close the public comment portion of the agenda. And we'll move on to new business and begin with the police commission items. And so the first thing we need to do is appoint commission chair and clerk. I have been serving in the capacity as chair for the last year, following working with the prior chair, Joe Anosco, in his role. And
I move that Commissioner Shaheen be appointed chair of the commission.
Second.
thank you very much. I'm honored to continue serving in this capacity. I think we have to take a formal vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then we also need to appoint a clerk.
And I move to appoint Commissioner Schur as clerk.
And I second. And so, all in favor?
Aye.
And then we have to select which one of us has the honor of representing the commission on an ethics committee, should an ethics committee need to be formed for any purpose. And I know this historically has been drawing a name out of a hat. So, Jackie, you have the honor.
I'll mix them up. I'll let you pick. And the lucky winner is?
Commissioner Coyle?
Winner. We promised we didn't put your name in there 3 times. So should an ethics committee be formed and require representation from the police commission, Commissioner Coyle will be the representative. All right, moving on to a facilities update. Chief, Karen, who would like to begin on that one?
So we are continuing, as we have been for the last year, on the mold remediation. We're currently in the process of redoing the detectives division, where mold remediation will continue there, and also possibly some asbestos remediation once they start with the remediation project. Also with that, the city has moved forward with designing the new HVAC system and in the process of evaluating and seeing what upgrades need to be made, as well as bringing in a new dehumidification system, which should hopefully be the root of the problem and would fix our mold problem from coming back again.
Great. Any questions from other commissioners on the facilities update?
Do we have any timeline? Understanding it's an ongoing discovery process.
So, I mean, we're doing things in steps. The timeline that we're hoping with the detectives division is probably 4 to 6 weeks, but that will depend on what they come across as the remediation project continues on there. From there, then we will be moving towards the basement, which hasn't had any remediation yet, and also we still have to do dispatch and the court office. So in a perfect world, we're hoping to have all of this done by the end of April.
Thank you.
And for those who are watching at home, there is ongoing work related to the CIP, which is the capital improvement planning process. The department does have funds allocated within that plan for the continued upgrading of the facilities here, as well as assessing opportunity for a new police department and things like our software upgrades and other technology improvements that require additional investment. So that planning process is underway now. It's, we've had these capital improvements allocated in the plan for a period of time, and the cycle continues, and so we're on track to keep that process
There'll be
underway.
a public hearing tomorrow night.
Yeah, public hearing tomorrow night if anyone's interested in the capital improvement planning process. Anything else on facilities anyone wants to discuss? All right. Moving on to a review of the community engagement recommendations. And what we discussed at the last meeting in December was that we would collectively review the current status of key recommendations and the timetable for some of those. Obviously, many of these priorities are happening in parallel. They're not, one doesn't necessarily depend on the other in order to be completed. And we talked about the need for us to collectively divide and conquer, as the prior commission, really Joe Onosco was the lead representative across all of the recommendations, working with the community group. So Buzz has offered to work on parts of the recommendations, as has Kate and as have I. And I think key today is really to talk through who wants to cover what and when, and begin to map out the timetable for next steps that we're prioritizing and hoping to get into place. As we do that, I guess before we get into the details on that, Chief, have you heard any updates on the mobile response yet, post the rollout in January?
Yeah, so they have weekly meetings with Dennis Walker, who's the representative from Seacoast Mental Health that's running our Rockingham County area mobile team. And prior to the rollout in January, we had been working with them kind of as a soft opening back through October, and we've been working through some of the issues that developed on the response times and what it is exactly that they will respond to, what they don't feel comfortable responding to, and what types of incidents are they're geared to handle until they can get up the proper staffing. And for the most part, we've been working without too many issues. I know across the state there have been some other issues that have popped up, but as far as our team and what we've been working collaboratively together.
So have you heard yet whether they've been able to, or how far away they are from having proper staffing in place?
I know the last meeting, he had mentioned that they had hired some staff. They just had to get them trained, and they were trying to bring up their team to full capacity, but they're not completely there yet. But they're hoping within the next month or two to get their staff complete.
Great. And so as far as you know, there haven't been active responses yet on.
No,
in the last couple-
they have responded
They have.
to some, yes.
And so far, those have been going well.
Yes.
Okay, great. Any questions on that particular?
Yeah, additional information. I reached out to the chief last week, making the suggestion that it would be useful, I think, for the chief, Dennis Walker, myself, Dave Keaveney, to summarize in an op-ed piece for the Portsmouth Herald what the unit was doing, so that the citizenry has a sense that this is going on, rather than it happening without anybody's knowledge, because I think it's a substantial step on behalf of the police department. So I'm meeting with Dave Keaveney on Thursday to move that forward.
Great. Terrific. And so one thing that would be useful, perhaps, as you think through that planning, is to highlight the types of incidents that the mobile response team is actually being deployed to support. This is one thing, Stephanie and I spent some time working through, and obviously there's models for particular incidents, situations when it would be obvious and automatic, and then there are other gray areas, as the chief noted, about when they're maybe not as comfortable responding, but their expertise could be useful. So I think helping inform the public as quickly and swiftly as we can about when this type of response team could best be deployed will help.
I'll make sure that
Yeah, that would be great.
that would be part of it.
So anything else, Chief, on the mobile response in particular, with 2 weeks under everybody's belt, that would be useful to highlight?
I think what Commissioner Scher has stated is getting out there in the public on what the expectations of the team are. I think there may be some type of perception that they're going to respond to any call that people feel shouldn't be a police officer, and in actuality, that is not the case. They're specifically looking to, right now, look at cases where someone may call has mental health issues, maybe feeling suicidal, and generally, prior to this team, we would take that person to the hospital to get evaluated, whereas they will respond and try to deal with that person without having to take them to the hospital. They're not equipped at this point right now to respond to any call that may fall into a category of mental health that people feel the police officers should not be there. So those are some of the things we're working out and finding out the boundaries of what they can do and what they can't do.
And so that was the other question that I know has come up regularly, and maybe another point for public information is who they're calling. Are they still calling the regular dispatch, or are they being directed to call a different team?
Right.
And so I think that's one thing we really need to spend some time, and maybe collectively we can do a work session or an information session where we do a presentation. From,
Yeah, and that, that's part of the perception even on our part.
Yes.
So the 988 number, we assume we're calling our local team, but in all actuality, that number is going to California, where they're just basically like a dispatch center. They call it, they transfer information, but they don't have the information like we may call and be asking specifics about certain individuals, and they don't have that information until we make contact with a representative from the mobile crisis team.
Great.
So there's time differences there of, handling certain situations that we're working through.
Right. So let's maybe collectively set an objective to do a public information session once we've had a little more time under everybody's belt with the response team working, and get as much information out to the general public as possible.
I think it's an excellent idea.
Great. Anything
No, I
on that?
think that's spot on.
Okay, so that, again, for people at home who may be watching, we're referring to a final document that outlines the recommendations and commitments made by the commission following a set of recommendations by the community resident advocacy group. You can find it on the website, but it's called Improving Police Department Practices, a collaborative set of recommendations involving a Portsmouth resident advocacy group, the commission, and the department. And so one of the first recommendations and actions is to collect and maintain officer encounter data, and we had Stephanie testify during public comment about a grad student. Chief, can you give an update on where that stands?
Yeah, so we have a grad student here that was coming in, looking at our data. To my knowledge now that she's still doing that, I haven't seen a final report from her. So I'd have to follow up on the status of where she's at with that during Christmas break. And if she's concluded her study, or if she's still working on that.
Okay. So we'll get back on that. I know the timetable between the holidays and school break and Omicron, I can speak from personal experience, has made the timeline a little
I
difficult.
can say we haven't received the final report, so I think school just goes back in session this week at UNH, so.
Next week,
Next
actually.
week, next week.
I've actually a question. Exactly what kind of data is the grad student collecting? I mean, what's available?
So she's looking at, a lot of, through the court office, prosecutorial data, case outcomes, so to that matter, looking at, there's a lot of information that she was looking through to see what we could and what we could not provide, and a lot of that is, she was working on and hadn't brought anything to our attention of what she hasn't do, so we've kind of been waiting to see her final report and her study to see what exactly information she's was able to come up with.
Is she working under the auspices of a particular department or professor at UNH, or is it UNH?
Yeah, she's in an internship program through UNH.
Okay. Do you know what department it is? Is it Justice Studies or Political Science or
She's a statistician.
Statistician? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what department she's working under.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll get some additional information on her work.
We should maybe endeavor to see if we can access that report by the next meeting. I mean, if she's done with her term, ostensibly she's put together her report. or
Yeah,
at least-
maybe she wants to come present it.
Right.
As part of her work. That would be
So why
terrific.
don't we see if that's a possibility for February?
Okay.
And then we're actually putting, try to get like tangible deadlines.
Great. And, both number 1 and number 2 relate to the CAD RMS system that we're working to implement. Chief, what's the latest in terms of the timeline there for the RFP and,
The RFP is supposed to be done and released by the end of the month.
great. So for those who may not be familiar with the acronym, we're issuing a request for proposals for an organization who can build a CAD RMS system to help us with the collection and maintenance of encounter data, as well as all kinds of data that the department relies on. And the timetable, Chief, you think how long are we giving people on the RFP to respond?
Yeah.
It'll probably be a month.
So it's going to be open for a month, and then so you're thinking, and then another 30 in the next, to decide.
We'll evaluate on
Right.
the bids that we have, and then we bring them back in for a final review. So I'd
So-
probably say hopefully maybe
End
by
of
the end of March.
March.
Okay,
We'll
so,
have identified a
A vendor.
vendor.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay, so hopefully by the end of Q1 2022, we'll have our partner identified and the building process can begin.
Yeah.
And the goal, obviously, is to move forward on that as quickly as possible, but we recognize it will be a relatively lengthy process from start to finish.
And as I understand it, the RFP process, the RFP that was designed is pretty specific to capture all the data that was identified through this work, right? So there was a lot of care in putting that RFP together, so we're not going back to the well later on. We'll
No,
make sure we
that's
have
why
everything
that's why it's been so long for us to release it, because it's really
detailed.
defined. It's
Yeah,
detailed.
And frankly, different from what most departments have historically
Thought.
required. Okay. The next recommendation on this list is to adopt a policy prohibiting NDAs and settlement agreements. And when we were working through this particular item, there was discussion about engaging with the city attorney and others on that particular topic, and I don't believe that meeting has yet taken place. So I will happily defer to either one of the lawyers who wants to work on.
I'm more than willing to meet with City Attorney Sullivan to sort that out, and I'll also consult with Commissioner Coyle on that. And if she wants to join that meeting, welcome.
No, you
You
can't.
can't do that.
You
'cause
can't
of
do
the-
that. That's the challenge. Two can't be involved
Oh,
because that
right,
constitutes a
right,
quorum.
yeah, sorry.
So,
But thank you, Commissioner Scher, for your willingness. No, seriously, I think it will be value.
and I think just for your benefit, one of the questions that has arisen about this particular item is whether there are situations where the victim actually would prefer an NDA, and we've had examples in the not too distant past where that was the case, and so how we approach having that policy, but having enough room so that we protect people's identity, and if they've been victimized by a particular situation and don't want to have things
Fair enough.
disclosed. So,
You think, yeah, we could give us, Commissioner Scher, do you think that you could be able to get that meeting done before next month, and then maybe
Oh,
we could
absolutely.
just give at least
I can give an overview to see where we are and if there's any particular issues that need resolution.
great. Number 4 was to publish the PPD documents on the website, and I know we've been perpetually updating those. Any new news on that front?
We've been updating. I know at our last meeting that President Wolford had mentioned there was a lot missing, but I'm not sure where she got her numbers from, but the majority of them are on there.
Okay.
I think we're down to like 30 that aren't out there that are under review, that we just have to put the ones up there that we will not be publishing. But again, Lieutenant Keaveney has been working on that project and is updating them in a timely fashion. And I think there's, out of 135, I believe there's like 110 up there now.
Okay, and then, Chief, do you want to give some thought? Maybe we don't need to discuss this right now, but we'll circle back on it at maybe next month's meeting. The process through which those that won't be published, how we just describe and define the reason for why those are not published.
Right. The majority of them are just officer safety issues and
Right.
operational procedures.
Okay, moving on to 5, talking about the potential, this came up several times, the police commission's priorities or the volunteer resident review panel. I actually think this falls into the category of a broader discussion related to the charter that extends beyond just the role of the commission in general and our priorities, but also extends to how we handle things like citizen complaints. So what I'd like to do is commit to working with the city attorney and others on a charter review and just evaluate what the boundaries are and where there's room relative to policy change versus charter change, because obviously there's a much higher threshold for charter change relative to what it takes to actually make charter changes. So we collectively agree that makes sense. I think this particular topic has come up multiple times. It came up for me when I was on the city council. It's come up since when we had a resident bring forward a complaint and wanting to be more clear about the commission's role in responding to that complaint. So I'm happy to take that on if everybody agrees. That's okay? Yes. All right. Let's see where we are here. So including encounter data analysis and officer performance evaluations, obviously the key driver to that, to being able to implement that, is having a way of capturing that encounter data and leveraging it, which we will be able to more effectively do once we have our CAD RMS system. Anything else we want to discuss specifically on that topic?
Not on that topic. Could we go back to D and E?
Sure. Number 5.
Number 5, D and E, yeah.
Sure.
As I think the members of the commission know, I'd like us to take another serious look at body-worn cameras. Having been the chair of the subcommittee of 3 years ago now, investigating body-worn cameras. While at the time there was a majority vote, 6-1 vote, in favor of not adopting body-worn cameras or a policy involving body-worn cameras, I think some members of the voting commission said, at least for now, it was at that moment it was not the right time. Some of it had to deal with technology upgrades needed in the department, a number of other issues. So I think 3 years have passed, and I think it's a good time to take a good look at it. I've had any number, as I've mentioned to some, during the time when I was knocking on doors, other than people not understanding what the police commission was or that there even was one, the second most common issue raised was that of why don't we have body-worn cameras? And I think it's our responsibility as representatives of the public. I think we need to take another serious look at it. And my understanding is pricing has gone down for both storage and for the initial cost of adoption. Since the commission 3 years ago, or the subcommittee 3 years ago, there's been legislation that will be making available money from the state for adoption. there still is available federal grants for adoption. So I think financially, it's worth another look, and technologically, it's worth another look.
And, okay. And I'd be happy to sort of take this on and sort of look at, maybe meet with Chief Newport, as well as maybe talk to some of the city councilors and see where we can be from a, it seems like the issue is not a willing, everyone's on board that it would be a useful tool, but it's sort of the funding. So it's like trying to get a little creative on it, and maybe in the next, at least in the next 30 days, I can make some preliminary efforts to, as we start talking about budget and we're talking, some fund, grant money, as well as maybe talking with the city council if they have some extra, ARPA funds or something like that that we might be able to tap into, or some other. So I think just seeing where we might have some funding streams would be a good starting place. What do you?
That sounds like the right next step to me. When we say revisit, the worry that I have is that we relitigate everything that the subcommittee has done not very long ago. And I think ultimately, Commissioner Scher, to your point, one of the big sticking points was ultimately the funding and the relative priority of the funding of body-worn cameras over other things like the CAD RMS system. So, ultimately, I think starting with this place of where could the funds come from? How could we approach funding this is probably the right next step. And if you're willing to do that, it's great. Does that work for you, Commissioner Scher?
Yes.
Great. Okay, and then you wanted to also address exculpatory evidence.
Yeah, the EES list, fondly known as the Laurie list. I'd like to have a conversation with the chief and talk also to the Attorney General's office to see what whether the such as the protocols are. And last time I reviewed the protocols, I had some concern over whether there was enough specificity in the criteria for who should and should not go on the EES list, the Laurie list, that it gave rise to bad personal relationships between a chief and an officer in the department. I'm not speaking of the Portsmouth department, but I'm aware of circumstances like that being involved, and I think it's worth revisiting both with the chief, but also with the Attorney General's office, who is the one who published the protocol several years ago now, as to who should go on the Laurie list and who should not go on the Laurie list. And I'm willing to take that on in terms of a conversation, further conversation with the chief and with the Attorney General's office.
Any questions about that, Commissioner Coyle?
No.
And I can report back to the commission next February, this coming February.
Right. Does that work for you, Chief?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so 6, 7, 8, and 9 relate, 6, 7, and 8 relate to use of additional data, analyzing and collecting additional data and utilizing that data in reviews and assessments of performance. Is there, I don't want to table all of the data collection and analysis to when the CAD RMS system is completed, but I didn't have enough visibility when these recommendations were being developed into whether we made specific commitments about other analysis we could do while we're working to build the CAD RMS system. So, Chief, can you share whether, was the assumption that anything related to analysis and data collection was informing how we're going to build this new system and would inform the training for how people are using the new system, and while we're working to build that, we have what we have? Or did we also make additional commitments to analyzing existing prosecution data, for example?
I think everything was based off of the new CAD RMS system and having the ability to have that information, easy access to be able to evaluate it.
Okay, so, and we're going to keep pushing that forward, and, I don't want to table that to suggest, with the suggestion that nothing else can be done between now and then. having spent a lot of time with our current data collection system, having looked at this when we were fighting for the funding for the CAD RMS, I can tell the public that it's very difficult to extract meaningful information given how old and dated and difficult it is to work with. So that isn't. Go ahead, Chief.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And just part of that, like the 8 part is what we have the intern here to see what she's
What we
actually
can-
able
Great.
to pull out, so,
Okay.
which we don't have yet.
So we'll get, hopefully her work will help inform what we can do in the interim. Okay, so moving on to 9, require review of case outcomes and officer performance evaluations and the use of case outcomes for training and improvement efforts, which I know we are already due to a certain extent.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to elaborate on that one?
No, I mean, just part of that was, going in negotiations and discussions with the unions, which, we have had the beginning stages of discussion, opening up contracts, and work on some of the issues that have been addressed.
Okay, is there a timeline, Chief? I know some of this is staggered because how we open contracts, when we open them, when they get renegotiated, it has been set. Is there a sense on your end, is this the kind of, effort that will be ongoing for the next 2 years, 3 years, or is there something that's more?
Probably, I mean, the contracts don't expire until June 30th of 2023, but we're trying to get the ball rolling to start negotiations as soon as possible.
Okay.
Chief, could you describe currently how the department uses a review of case outcomes and officer performance evaluations?
So basically what happens now is if we have a case where something was at court, was addressed or brought to a prosecutor's attention, that prosecutor then therefore bring that case to the supervisor or to the officer directly and discuss what happened and the outcome of it and what changes could happen, or what they did was the proper way of doing it, or if there's any issues that are raised or flagged, that prosecutor would then, like I said, bring it to the attention of the supervisor and we would address it.
So, for example, if there was the motion to suppress based on a failure to provide Miranda rights or something like that, and that was granted, or there was significant concern about that, the prosecutor from the legal department would then contact the supervisor about the officer's performance in that circumstance?
Yes, and then that officer would receive remedial training on the issue.
Got it. And that's documented so it becomes a part of the officer's periodic evaluation?
Yeah, or it's covered under training. It all depends on the situation and what exactly the issue was. But yes, it is reviewed. Not necessarily be brought up in a performance evaluation, but it could be done as a personnel issue under the training part of the personnel file.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that one?
I don't.
Okay. Again, number 10 relates to the CAD RMS system and specifically looks at, how we evaluate the cost of resources spent depending on the type of call for service. This is not something we can necessarily do now, and we've talked a lot about potentially bringing outside resources to bear on how we would evaluate that kind of cost-benefit analysis. I think this is one of those that would be really strengthened by an outside resource expert, whether it's an academic or someone who can really, an economist who can help us tease out cost allocation, et cetera. So this I think requires further study and discussion, and I'd be happy to keep pushing this one forward to assess which type of partner we might be able to bring in to help us think through it.
Could I briefly go back to 5B? Commissioner Shaheen agreed to take on the assessment of charter changes versus policy changes. The second part of that involved conducting surveys in marginalized communities. It seems like a relatively separate topic. I'm certainly willing to take that part on if Commissioner Shaheen wants to focus on the charter versus policy issue, and try and find a way to get something more than an anecdotal impression from marginalized communities in Portsmouth as to levels of satisfaction.
Yep. I mean, I'm fine to divide and conquer on that one. We did do a survey in 2018, which was fairly extensive, but again, that's going on. By the time we were to get another survey issued, that would be 5 years probably. But I think it's worth revisiting how that survey was structured and conducted, because we did, as I recall, I've spent time reading it when I first was appointed to the commission before I actually ran, and it was a very, UNH was in charge of doing the work, making sure we had high response rates, et cetera. So it would be worth looking at that and trying to decide how best to proceed.
I agree with that. I took a pretty in-depth look at it also as a part of the body cam subcommittee, and one of the things that was notable to me is that in lower income families, the level of satisfaction with the police department was quite different from other people in other economic strata, and I think that's part of what probably gave rise to this. So I think, I don't know that we need to do a whole new comprehensive large survey, and we may want to do something that finds a constructive and viable way to survey marginalized communities.
Great. Okay, moving on to this. I think number 12 is similar to number 10 and relative to what we need to do to best address it, which is evaluating the resources spent responding to calls and patrol activities related to mental health issues. And I very much hope that with the support of the mobile response team, because mental health will have even more data that will help inform this work. Anything specific we want to discuss on this particular item?
The only question I would have is, do we have can the department provide now something of a breakdown of the calls we receive on a monthly basis? How many are mental health related? How many are notification of a crime in process, or having, does the department already have something of a breakdown?
We have one mechanism that just says we'd label as a person in crisis on a call that we feel is related to a mental health situation. But it's not going to break it down deeply as much as what you're asking.
But what you could say, we could look at, like we do with traffic violations, traffic stops. We could say number of traffic stops versus people in crisis versus crime or
Crime report, yeah.
Right. Or whether,
But basically, however the call comes in initially, whether it could be a crime, it could not be a crime, it could be, really ultimately a noise complaint. But after we get there, we deal with a situation. If it's related to a mental health call, then we'd label it just as to mark it as a person in crisis call if it was something that was, the call originated from a mental health crisis.
Are there any other types of calls other than related to a person in a mental health crisis included in the person in crisis category? Or are those the only ones that usually fall into that category?
Yes, yeah. So it doesn't break it down by, like you're saying, a specific crime, or it would just, regardless of what the initial call came in as, and, generally if it's a crime, it's still actually, even if it's a crime in we could make an arrest or something that matter. It still could be labeled as a crisis, person in crisis call.
Maybe it'd be useful in terms of thinking that through, that in my conversations with Dave Cavini and Dennis Walker, particularly Dave, maybe he could provide just a percentage of person in crisis calls out of the total number of calls in a month or a week or
Or
whatever.
the number of person in crisis, the track whether it was led to an arrest or not. You know, that's one way we can glean some data, right? Like, how is that, where are people tracking if they are in crisis? Are we bringing them to hospital? Are they de-escalating, or is it leading to a arrest for disorderly I don't know. I think that if we could even get some of that data, that might be instructive.
Yeah, well, I just wonder, I mean, we report every month on the monthly traffic stats.
Yes.
Could we also report, I just don't know how valid the data point is. That's what I'm trying to get at. You know, it is helpful to know we initially get a call and we believe the person's in crisis.
Right.
But if we don't have any follow-up data to
You
know.
Right, you're not gonna have that. I mean, I could say, we responded to 1,000 calls this month, and out of that 1,000 calls, 250 were labeled a person in crisis. But that's not really telling you anything about what that call is.
Right.
At the front end, just thinking that through, but at the front end, in terms of dealing with the mobile crisis unit, it would be valuable to have a sense of, at the front end, the potential for issues relating to mental health, however they end up being resolved, understanding that it's a small subsection.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so let's say now that we have this mobile crisis team, and we have, just using the same numbers, 250 calls with a person in crisis, and then it could say, out of those 250, 10 where the mobile crisis team responded out.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, that would be useful.
Or these number got arrested of that portion, and then you can really draw that data from a prosecution standpoint. What happened at the disposition of, I mean, it's just getting more data and.
Maybe as a part of my conversations with Dave Cavini, we can at least develop that front-end data.
Yeah, and just to see what it looks like to actually try to pull it.
Right.
Yeah. And see if there's 250 is out of 400 cases or out of 1,000
Right.
cases or
Right.
2,000 cases.
It does give a big, even just the overview, the broad picture, and then we'll have a better sense of what we're dealing with in terms of volume.
Yeah.
To extract more meaningful data.
Okay, so I think the rest of these items, Cahoots type call response, which is the next item, and the MOU between the PD and social service agencies, that falls under the umbrella of the mobile response through Seacoast Mental Health, and we've collectively agreed we're going to give it a little more time, but then it would be great to do a public information session on how the mobile response is working. In the interim, we're going to be working on some public education and an op-ed, maybe some other things we can do to effectively communicate to the community about how it's going and the objective. So that is, I think, a hopeful starting point, and much further along than we were even just a year ago. And then the next two items relate to the budget, in particular, the budget planning process. And number 16 is specific to body-worn cameras, which Commissioner Coyle's taking on. Number 15, I think, relates to the budget planning process, so if we all can agree that we'll cover that under the other discussion about budget planning, we can move on from this agenda item, or this agenda item. So I think, what we hoped to accomplish in working through this document as a newly constituted commission is a way of dividing and conquering the follow-up and next steps so that not one commissioner was responsible for the lion's share of the work, and also we each can contribute in different ways. And I feel like I have my marching orders. You all
As do
have
I.
your
Likewise.
marching orders. Okay, great. So we'll come back, and one of the immediate next steps will be to re-engage, follow up with a grad student and see if we can get her here, and then also think through whether we can do a public information session on mobile response for the next meeting. Okay, anything else on the recommendations and next steps, timeline? All right. So the last item for us is the budget planning process. And so Karen, would you love to give us an update on where things stand and what the timeline is on that front?
Well, I'm currently doing our status quo budget because that's usually our jumping off point. And then on January 27th, the city manager has a meeting with all the department heads. And that's usually when we get all of the amounts to budget for health insurance and whatnot. So we'll know what our basis increase is going to be over FY22, going into FY23. So it's usually the COLA, the health insurance, if the leave at term has been reevaluated and that goes up or goes down. So we usually get those numbers and we see what the impact of that is. It's usually it can be anywhere from a 3 to 5% increase already with just the basics being added on. It'll take me probably a week to get all that data in, and so maybe the week of February the 7th, maybe we could do a work session that week, because at least you'll have the status quo and what that increase is going to be. And then also department requests, like we've been trying to get back up to our 2008 staffing levels. So it would require an officer to get back up to at least the 2008 levels, and also a dispatcher, which we gave up during the COVID issues. So you're looking at 150, 160 on the top of just our COLAs and our health insurance. So a meeting that week would probably be informative to give you, excuse me, that information, what it costs to add another officer in, et cetera.
Okay, so we're talking the week of February 7th.
Yeah, because our public hearing will be the following week.
Okay.
So I can incorporate any recommendations and
When
whatnot.
when you're preparing the budget, would it also be possible, and I know this exists, but sometimes I think people don't necessarily connect the CIP requests with the operating budget. Would you mind or somehow connect those two? Because I recognize there's a separate process.
Correct.
But I think as the city council's evaluating the relative investments
Right.
across the city, I know this because I've been in this position where I'm on the council and I'm evaluating, CIP, larger, infrastructure type investment relative to the operating budget.
Correct.
But it's in the mind of a counselor, it's for the department, right?
I was going to say, your tax rate includes
Exactly.
the rolling stock, the capital plan,
Right.
et cetera.
Right,
Yep.
so maybe especially for our new commissioners, when we work through prioritizing as part of that work session, we include what the CIP requests are that we have outgoing.
Well, I was
or
going to say,
outstanding.
and I would recommend tomorrow night is the CIP public hearing. So I would recommend
Yeah.
watching that because you'll see all the different projects from all the different departments in there. And then they cull down from there because we always have more requests than we have budget money. So,
Great, thank you.
yep.
So questions about the budget planning process, the timeline?
Straightforward.
I'm good.
Okay, great. Then we will move on to the chief's portion of the agenda. You're up, chief.
All right. Try to get this.
While you get it up, I can say that we're already past number 1 because we've done the swearing in for our new officers, which is exciting.
So the next is donations that we received. The first donation in the amount of $2,500 from Portsmouth residents Paul Gormley and Kim Aguchi for the Portsmouth Police Department. They just wanted to thank us for the work that we do and appreciation that they have for our department, and have generously made a donation on behalf of the police department for $2,500. So I need a motion to accept the $2,500.
I move to accept the $2,500.
Second.
Do we have to actually read the motion into the record, or are we okay?
You have to read.
If you could.
Yeah, do you mind actually reading the motion as stipulated here in the agenda?
This motion up here?
Yeah.
Okay. I move to accept the $2,500 from Portsmouth residents Paul Gormley and Kimi Oguchi for the Portsmouth Police Department and forward to the City Council for their, and forward it to the City Council for their action.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Right, and
All right, the second donation is a form of a $15 Moe's Italian sandwich gift card from Libby Giordano and everyone at Make-A-Wish for Captain Mike Maloney for his efforts with one of their events last month. They asked for our assistance in doing a Make-A-Wish event at Portsmouth Toyota that Captain Mike Maloney helped coordinate and make sure everybody was safe. They wanted to do a vehicle parade which around the event. They stayed on the premises, but there was a lot of coordination towards it, and the event was a big hit, and therefore, in their thankfulness, they have a Moe's gift card for $15. So I need a motion on that.
So I move to accept the $15 Moe's gift card for Captain Michael Maloney of the Portsmouth Police Department, and that we forward it to the City Council for their action.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 So moving on to traffic stats. For the month of December 2021, we had 775 motor vehicle stops, 33 summonses, and 71 reportable motor vehicle crashes.
Since I'm new to this, is that a kind of normal number of reportable motor vehicle crashes, or?
I think that number is a little bit high.
Yeah, it's a little high.
And seeing that we didn't have any snow in December, that's not usually, that could be a reasoning, but that's just,
It is what it
it
is.
is what it is. We have been making a concerted effort to be a lot more active in our motor vehicle activity to try and bring that number down, which therefore I think justifies our motor vehicle activity. As we progress through the winter, hopefully that number will start to come down.
Thank you.
Financial report, that would be Karen.
Yep. Last month, we were 2.5% below the cap, but this month, it's narrowing, and we're 2% below the cap. We're obviously still in the black, but given everything that's happened so far this fiscal year, people on injured, military deployments who are back, computer software expenses, higher than normal recruiting costs, and issues recruiting dispatchers. With the dispatchers, as I said before, we hire hour for hour on overtime. So we've had some significant hits this year with our budget. Although I have confidence that we'll end the year in the black, if it continues to go down that gap, it would just be prudent to inform the council we may come in, possibly, come in for a supplemental, but we'll do everything we can to absorb all the costs that have happened so far this fiscal year.
I just actually to mention on that note, like some things that obviously we can't predict, which happened, 2 weekends ago, where we had a protest that we had to be prepared for, and it was upwards of 30 police officers that are out there. Majority of, actually almost all of them, but me, they're on overtime. Those are unknown costs that are built into our overtime budget, but sometimes we come in below, but sometimes we go over because of events like this. So, like Karen said, when it gets down to the end of the fiscal year, when things get tight, we may have to go back in front and ask for supplemental income.
I was going to say, when April 1st comes, that's when we do the rest of our projection out through June, and we can pretty much nail it on the head, depending if we have any pending any events.
And I think it's worth just pausing on that point relative to the impact on staffing, because, there's overtime often is a hot button issue, and I think every person in this community has been impacted by COVID and the reality of the last 2 years, whether it's, staffing shortages when you go to the grocery store or when you're trying to eat out at a restaurant in town. I mean, we're facing those same realities here. We have people who are out because of COVID. We have, as you said, military deployments and other staffing related challenges, not the least of which in our dispatch unit. So I think it's not a surprise, despite Karen's valiant efforts, and I'm amazed it's actually not more alarming already, just given all the pressures on the department.
A question out of my newness to the commission. Historically, understanding that the COVID years have been weird, but historically, are there months in the budget year that put more stress on the cap than other months?
I could
I was gonna
probably
say
say the
summer.
summertime, because that's when most of our officers want to take their vacation time. So we're already at a minimum staffing level, so we don't have the extra bodies to replace. We have minimum staffing levels, and to be able to have those staffing levels in place, we have to use overtime. And being understaffed and not having extra bodies, we don't have the extra bodies, so you have to replace them with someone overtime. And with our current staffing levels, most of the time is people being ordered to stay over, not necessarily volunteering for it. It's because we don't have enough current bodies to properly staff our shifts.
And in terms of annual leave, he's talking mainly about the sworn patrol officers, because that's the 24-hour portion of it. Per their contract, they have to do a vacation pick. So we do have the same number of officers almost on every week, because everybody can't take July 4th off.
Right.
So if you look at the vacation pick, there are 3 officers out every single week.
Right.
And so you have to,
So I think what Karen's saying is, no one can arbitrarily just say, I want this day off, and everybody gets a day off.
Right.
We have a selection process that's on a year in advance, where you pick your vacation throughout the year based off of seniority, but just, as Karen said, there's 3 people that are allowed out per day.
and that's just the officers, not the ranking.
Yeah, just, off the officers, so.
Ranking has the same.
And out of ignorance, since I work in an institution has their own budget cycle, when's the end of the budget year?
June 30th.
So
We're halfway through.
but we've taken, in terms of the summer hit, we've already absorbed that.
But again, as he was saying, and I was saying, the vacation pick, in the summer, there's still only 3 people out
Right.
every time.
Yeah, but I think what he's saying is that that summer, where we take our biggest hit, we're already past in this fiscal year.
Right.
So we just have to deal with the month of June, which is not nearly as bad as July and August.
And of course, that doesn't impact dispatch at all. Dispatch is very understaffed right now, so, and we're paying premium dollar for that.
overtime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we have officers filling in there, firemen filling in there, and they don't get a dispatch rate. So, so anyway, so I'm just hoping that the cap stays at least steady and doesn't go down, but we'll watch it over the next couple of months. In terms of the strategic plan, no further update at this time. It's a work in progress, and again, it gets more refined as we start doing the budget process with staff. In terms of grants, we received the solicitation for renewing the VOCA grant, which is the Victims of Crime Act funds. Our victim witness advocate is paid by 3 sources: the VOCA funds, which are the victim of crimes, the VAWA, violence against women, and our budget funds, which do matches for both of those. It's a financial nightmare to do our reports, but anyway, so that solicitation has come. The deadline is in February, so that'll be coming before you probably February or March. And then that's it.
Thank you. And again, I feel the need to publicly thank you, Karen. This, under normal circumstances, your job is extraordinarily hard, and these are not normal circumstances. They're extreme. So we are grateful for all your efforts every day to keep things running.
I was going to say, my first year here, we returned $415. And then last year, because of COVID, we returned $415,000. So, just because we didn't have a lot of the expenses that we normally do. So,
This year, if anything, you have the expenses back up or even increased for the lack of staffing. But also, sort of operations, people are, there isn't as much isolation, or people are really have resumed their lives, which
Correct.
brings all the other costs back up.
all back.
Okay, moving on to Any miscellaneous other items, other business? Anyone else want to chime in?
I have nothing else.
Just a reminder, because it falls upon the police department to enforce, but the city has adopted or readopted the mask mandate for indoor public space. So please remember that and don your mask, and hopefully we're going to be on the other side of this phase of the pandemic very soon. Anything else on that one, Chief, you want to mention?
Nope, I think that covered it.
Okay, the next meeting of our commission is Tuesday, February 15th. We'll have lots more work to cover then, and I can get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.